The other part of this equation is the gardens. Who was gardening and who made all the vegetables and the vegetable dishes and the salads that went with that salad oil and those mustards and all of those other delicious things. And here at the garden, there's not really a lot of names, but a man named Joe performed at least some of the activities because we have a letter from Nellie Madison Willis, who wrote to her aunt to say in 1805 that Joe had been paying a great attention to the garden and everything in it looked flourishing when she saw it last, and her peas were growing very, very well. So she urged her to really get home fast so that she could really eat them and enjoy them. So the whole trying to get things eaten in their seasonal best was an important thing because there really wasn't any way to do anything other than dry things or salt things to preserve them. So salads and peas and rutabagas and potatoes and all those things you wanted to eat, they were made as part of the menu while they were at their freshest. The Madisons, for some reason, hired a French gardener in 1810, and he certainly would have had enslaved gardeners working under him. It was a pretty large space, and he, unfortunately, they then fired him. There was the death of a man who had worked as a cook in Washington, but who also was a gardener. That was people died from many kinds of things in those times, from diseases that were incurable. And so that was a sad loss, even though we don't get his name from Madison, which is what's really so frustrating. Dolly wrote in 1825 that they dismissed the French gardener. For what reason, we don't know. But as soon they called in, she says, they called in 3 black men who understood the business, and we hope to have from them as many good things as usual. So clearly there were 3 enslaved men who knew gardening and could step right in after the firing of the French gardener and produce vegetables as good as any that had been before. And then there was an old man working in the beds who showed a visitor, Mr. Balch, through the garden, and he recalled that the man, as they entered the garden, kind of paused and leaned on his rake and just seemed to await, the inquiries about this beautiful space. It must have been great. Most of us, if we go to someone's garden, the first thing we want to know is, oh, well, what's that? And how did you grow that? And can I taste this? And so he was kind of waiting down. But he comments that he took me down the inclined plane of the garden and showed me various plants and grafted trees. So he's showing off his skill in a garden that contained fruits and food stuffs, but vegetables, but also fruit trees. And they grew cherries and figs, and all of those take knowledge to know how to deal with them, how to graft them, how to grow them, how to prune them, so that when the time came to have a cherry pie or to make a cherry cordial, the kinds of things that Dolly Madison would have required at her table, her cooks and the cook's assistants and the scullions and the yardmen and all of the other producers of food here had some idea of their input to it and how to go about making it happen, especially since so many of them had multiple kinds of skills. They were not limited to just a single work role. For an example, apparently many the weavers and the spinners here worked kind of full-time, producing enough cloth for the enslaved community. But it wasn't just clothing. They probably produced all the aprons and all of the dish towels and the pot holders that have to be used when you're using cast iron materials that will burn your hands. And so all of those items also would have come from a group, the spinners and the weavers.